With Sony now focusing on the elusive vlogger demographic with cameras like the ZV-1 and the ZV-1 II, we may have reached the end of the line with the RX100 series. However, if we look at some major photo retailers, we can see that the 7 is still available new, the 5A is still available, even the Mark III is still available. With so many models to choose from in the RX100 lineup, coupled with the fact that they all kind of look the same, it's not easy to tell where the best value is. And that's what we're going to find out in today's video. But to really understand the RX100 system, we have to take a trip back to 2012, when it all began with the original RX100 Mark I, the camera that revolutionized compact cameras forever. It was a 20 megapixel camera with a 1-inch sensor, and this would continue all the way until the last RX100. This particular one used a 28 to 100 millimeter equivalent f1.8 to 4.9 lens, offered 10 frames per second continuous, gave you the ability to shoot RAW, and offered 5 centimeter close focus distance. The camera also had features like auto exposure bracketing and 1080p 60 fps video, making it a little pocketable powerhouse. And I just want to state that if you can find the original RX100 in good condition, there is nothing stopping you from taking amazing photos with it. And I use this camera in just about every situation: desert, parks, to inside a moving helicopter shooting pictures of the Hoover Dam, to street photography. The raw files give you a lot of latitude in editing. This camera can still be a great choice today. So every other camera after this is going to be better. And just when everyone thought Sony was going to rest on its laurels and just rake in the cash, a year later they released the RX100 Mark II. And Sony, in characteristic Sony fashion, started piling on the features. This time they gave us a backside illuminated sensor, which makes this camera a little bit better in low light and in high ISO situations. It gave us a multi-interface hot shoe. In other words, you can add an optional flash or EVF. This hot shoe would disappear in the next model and never come back. We now have a tilting LCD screen and faster autofocus. Some major changes actually took place with the RX100 Mark III. This time we had a lens with an equivalent field of view from 24 to 70 millimeters. And this would continue all the way to the RX100 Mark V. 24 is noticeably wider than 28, and for a lot of people they didn't mind the fact that they lost 30 millimeters at the long end. Now, whether you prefer 28 to 100 or 24 to 70 is a personal choice. For the first time, we had a pop-up EVF. Now, the resolution wasn't too high, but just the fact that they managed to put an EVF into a body this small is pretty impressive. Video got better with full sensor readout, HDMI video output, a built-in 3-stop ND filter, and no more hot shoe as we mentioned before. And just when we thought Sony was done, a year later we had the Mark IV, this time with a new stacked CMOS sensor, 1/32,000 second maximum shutter speed with the electronic shutter mode, 16 frames per second continuous shooting, 4K video with full sensor readout per second bitrate. So if you're choosing a camera for photo and video and you need that 4K video, then the Mark IV is where you should be looking. The EVF got a bump to 2.36 million dots. There were other video features and improvements. Lower battery life, which wasn't great to begin with. With these cameras, you really do need to buy at least one extra battery if you're going to be using it out and about. Finally, Sony gave us the option to fine-tune how auto ISO behaved. With the previous models, the auto ISO algorithm I think was a little too aggressive. I know others agree with me. With this one, you can actually fine-tune it. The RX100 Mark V. Technology marches on. Even though the sensor and the lens are the same as in the previous generation, this time we had faster burst shooting and, for the first time, phase detect autofocus, not just contrast detect, which makes this a much better camera for autofocus performance. And the number of autofocus points was significantly bumped up. Of course, this comes at the expense of battery life, so once again, if you're buying one of these cameras, factor in the price of 1 or 2 extra batteries. Luckily, they're not expensive and they're readily available. The RX100 5A was a slight improvement over the 5. Anytime I see Japanese companies releasing the same camera and just adding a letter, I get this sense that maybe the previous one had something wrong with it. But in this case, it does just look like a minor feature bump. We have a slightly deeper buffer, some new white balance options, some new video abilities, and Sony is still selling this camera brand new today. With the Mark VI, things got a little crazy because now the lens became a 24 to 200 millimeter f2.8 to 4.5, giving you incredible versatility as far as reach goes and making it once again a very popular travel camera. While the previous models all featured some basic image stabilization, with the Mark VI, Sony claims a 4-stop improvement. This was the first model to feature a touchscreen, and it had a redesigned EVF which is faster to deploy. Of course, some sacrifices had to be made, and the ND filter disappeared. Finally, in the RX100 Mark VII, Sony just piled on the features. A whole new sensor with more coverage for phase detect autofocus, faster autofocus with subject tracking, a microphone jack, 20 FPS shooting with no blackout, 7 frame, 90 FPS single burst mode, 180 degrees up down, minus 90 degrees down touchscreen LCD, an intervalometer, and even improved stabilization for video recording. With the amount of features they threw into this one, maybe they knew this was going to be the last one. Finally, let's compare the specs of all the cameras. So for each one, for example the Model 1, we have the equivalent field of view, 28 to 100, the aperture range, the SEPA battery life rating, what kind of sensor it is, how much it weighs, the maximum FPS, the size of the buffer, the fastest shutter speed that it can do, whether it has image stabilization, whether it has a built-in EVF, electronic viewfinder, the ISO range of the camera, whether it has a built-in ND filter, the number of autofocus points, the autofocus type, contrast detect is CD, and phase detect is PD, the type of LCD screen, the highest resolution possible in video, whether it has a slow-mo video option, whether it has a microphone port, and the prices, at least as of the making of this video, in US dollars, new and in minty used condition on eBay. So going down the list, we have the Mark I, the Mark II, 3, 4, 5, 5A, 6, and 7. As you can see, you can go absolutely crazy comparing the specs of these cameras. More than anything, I want to emphasize that you really should try one of these in person to see if you like the ergonomics. So where's the value? I think the value is in the highlighted so-called middle models from the Mark III to the Mark V-A. I think if you can spring for a 5A, that's where I personally go. And if you can find one in clean, used condition at $500, that's pretty good value. Of course, the Mark III is no slouch itself. It's just that you don't get those quality of life improvements that we got in the Mark IV, with the better EVF and the ability to fine-tune that auto ISO, which really is a useful feature. And obviously, if you need 4K video, the oldest camera you're considering really is the Mark IV. All in all, these are great cameras. If you're looking for an ultra-portable, pocketable camera to take with you everywhere that's still better than your phone, the RX100 series is the way to go. If you have thoughts about this line of cameras, let us know in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching, and subscribe for more.